Good afternoon, everyone. I am Teresita Soto with PACT. We would like to thank you for joining us today, and in particular, thank our panelists for joining us as we convene in this space. Please note we will have someone monitoring our Facebook comments. If you have any questions, to feel free and comment down below. Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Teresita Soto. Nos gustaría darles las gracias a todos por unirse con nosotros a través de este medio. Agradecemos en particular a nuestros panelistas del día de hoy. PACT is a multi-faith, multiracial organization that leads grassroots organizing in 30 congregations throughout the Santa Clara County to build a more healthy and more just community. Although we are of different faiths and traditions, we all share the value of dignity and respect for all people, which is why we are sharing this moment here today. This is the 21st episode of our PACT Justice Project. The Justice Project, which began in response to our current shelter-in-place order and in response to our interfaith leaders throughout the county who have came together and have gathered over 100 signatures on our moral response to COVID-19 statement. The Justice Project's purpose is to create a space to bring faith leaders, community leaders, and experts to listen and engage each other on the most important issues of our times. Let us take a moment to mourn the loss of our Justice Ginsburg. Our hearts are jury response to the death of Breonna Taylor, the putting on hold the lives of hundreds of DACA students, and 32 days from a critical election that will transform all of our futures. Today, we will continue our discussion on faith votes. We will hear from our community members about their struggles and learn from our faith leaders of our local and statewide PICO affiliates how they are calling congregants to action leading up to the election. We will talk about proposition ballots, including schools and communities first, that gave us an opportunity to transform our neighborhoods and schools. I would like to ask Patty McDonald and Aida Fotovat to share a bit about themselves. And as we are entering the final weeks of our election, what are some of the things that worry you the most? And we can go ahead and start with Patty.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. My name's Patty McDonald, and I'm newly retired after a 35-year career in education. I was a classroom teacher. I was a new teacher, advisor, and mentor, and I ended my career as a principal. I've seen a lot of changes in the education and in our community. I got involved with PACT actually after the last presidential election. The day after the election, this always makes me emotional. I was out on the playground and I had children come up and tell me how frightened they were that their families would be separated. So when St. John Vianney had a PACT meeting and I learned about the Rapid Response Network, that's when I became involved. And I became involved in our LOC. So thank you for inviting me here. Did you want me to respond to how the initiative, how the proposition will affect schools at this point?
We can go ahead and talk about it now, or we can talk about it later, whichever you'd like.
So I'll go ahead and talk about it. Schools have been perpetually underfunded. Years ago, we had, in 1988, passed Prop 98, which was supposed to guarantee a minimum funding for schools. And there were all these loopholes that when we went into recession, when there were budget cuts, that they were always able to raid the money that was set aside for schools to help fund other categories in the state budget. So with Prop 15, there will be money generated through property taxes. They're changing the funding structure for businesses, and that will not, the way it's written, it will not be able to be rated by the general fund or by the government for other purposes. We're heading into a period where the state has really taken a hit with personal income tax because of COVID. And so that will directly affect schools. So this is really, in the initial years, will probably help just cover what we're losing from the state budget. But there are many, many ways that it will help our children and our community. Most importantly, I can think of social emotional needs and providing services that for children and their families to meet those needs, reducing class size, ways to help our students that are struggling learners, having supplemental instruction. We have ways to bring up bond measures to cover, some of the structural things, but that could come under schools general fund too. We've got aging schools in our county that desperately need help. We could really benefit in this county with a strong preschool program that will lead into the elementary level and parent education. That would make the single biggest difference in our community, would be to have a strong relationship with families in the school beginning at such a young age. So I see the importance of this proposition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patty. Ahora queremos invitar a Aida a compartir con nosotros.
Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Aida Fotovat, de la comunidad hispana de la Iglesia Católica de San Francisco de Assisi de San José. Por muchos años he llevado a pacientes a doctores, hospitales, y he observado directamente los problemas que aquejan a nuestros servicios, tales como Medical, Medicare y el sistema en general. Algunos de los ejemplos que les puedo dar es que he visto cómo cambian a pacientes sin aviso. Hay procedimientos que se les hace a los pacientes que no son necesarios, pero Medicare paga por ellos. Entonces, no se necesita preguntar ni pedir. Eso es un gasto. Los audífonos que son tan necesarios para las personas de la tercera edad no son cubiertos. Hay cobertura para anteojos, pero no hay un doctor en el condado que los tome, ni doctores ni optómetras que los están tomando. Entonces, además, las cuentas médicas siempre van a nombre de la madre. Si hay algún problema, esto le cae a la madre. De tal manera que los créditos de las mujeres casi siempre están arruinados por problemas hospitalarios. En general, ahora, hace 15 años que vivo algunos problemas médicos y estoy viendo que aunque tengo cobertura propia y tengo cobertura privada, también me afecta en varias maneras. En fin, nuestro sistema médico necesita ser revisado, mejorado, para poder realmente servir a los pacientes y no dejar que los hospitales y los médicos sigan siendo esclavos de las compañías de seguro. Nosotros debemos quejarnos, pero no debemos quejarnos detrás de las paredes. Debemos de quejarnos en una forma abierta. Por favor, mi mensaje para quienes nacieron aquí es: ejerciten el derecho del voto. Y para aquellos que no nacieron aquí y que decidieron hacerse ciudadanos americanos, por favor, ejerciten el privilegio que se les dio el día que se les hizo ciudadanos americanos. Voten, que es la única forma de probar nuestra acción cívica. No lo desperdiciemos.
Muchas gracias, Aida. We are honored to have both of you here with us today. I would like to invite Father Brendan to introduce yourself and share a little bit of where you're from and your faith tradition.
Good evening, everybody. Buenas tardes a todos y gracias por la invitación. No hablo tan bien como Aida y pues sí voy a hablar en inglés, pero it's good to be with you. My name's Father Brendan Busse. I'm a Jesuit priest, associate pastor here at Dolores Mission in Boyle Heights, Los Angeles. I grew up here in Los Angeles on the eastern edge of Los Angeles County. I was born down in Orange County where my grandparents moved back in the 60s. Like a lot of folks from the Midwest, they moved out here, took advantage of a lot of public schools, property taxes allowed them to buy their first homes, things like that. but then grew up in public schools here in Los Angeles. And I actually didn't meet the Jesuits. I wasn't, we were baptized to keep my grandma happy, you know, but met the Jesuits as a volunteer in Central Juvenile Hall back in the 90s when Juvenile Hall was overflowing, because that was the only solution we thought we had to social problems, was just throw away the people who were suffering. So growing up in LA, that was kind of a waking up moment for me, that something about my suburban reality, they were investing plenty of money in public schools, but then here in East LA, most of the kids my age were in jail. The public schools weren't doing them any service, and many of them ended up locked up. So that has a big part of my own vocation, growing up in this fascinating city of Los Angeles, now privileged to work here at Dolores Mission in Boyle Heights.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Father. I wanted to ask you, when you hear the cries of our congregants or your congregants, what are you telling yourself? And also, what are you telling them about how to process this period in time?
Yeah, you know, it's a good question. Because I would say, I mean, our congregation cries a lot, cries at funerals. We cry for the suffering of our people. But we don't really complain all that much, because this is a place that knows what it means to be on the outskirts. It knows what it means to be marginalized. So in this moment, their concerns, I think the new thing, like the community's been disinvested for years and years. The community has struggled for so many things. So I don't hear those concerns, although they're always there. Why don't we reform immigration system? Why don't we invest more in education? Why don't we give people of this neighborhood another option other than jail, you know? Why don't we take care of our mental health? I mean, those have been cries forever and ever. The new one that I think with the pandemic happening right now is the concern that maybe we feel disconnected, you know? And that's the biggest worry, I think, of our community, Latino community, you know, that to not be able to be with each other is one of the hardest things about this moment. And so a lot of people talk about, you know, this is an uncertain time. This is something new is happening here that we don't know about. And I think early on, I began to realize that I stopped calling it uncertain, because I think what's happening now is certain things are becoming very clear. And there are things that maybe people weren't paying attention to before. If you had privilege not to be affected by the system that wasn't working for the last 50 years, you know, good for you. But what's happening now is not something uncertain. It's the logical conclusion of a system that it's set up 50 years ago to do this, to do what it's doing now. And so whenever I speak to people, I try to say, well, what are we learning now? What are we seeing now? And who needs to be seen? Whose voice needs to be heard? What things need to be done? And I think if we just shift that perspective, it's not really an uncertain time. It's unstable, that's for sure. But it's not uncertain. We are clear in our faith about what's important and what needs to be done. This community has always been clear about what it means to treat somebody with dignity. What has been unstable is the way in which the system doesn't allow us to do that. And so I say to everybody, I don't think this is an uncertain time. I think it is a time where things are becoming very clear, and there's a kind of call to action that we do something so that this not become a time where we just have to live through it. Let's just get through it. I think this is the time, and this is for me personally as much as anything else, this is the year I want to live the rest of my life from. I want to live my rest of my life with the kind of moral clarity that we have right now, that we know who essential workers really are, that we know that Black lives matter, and until they do, no lives really matter, right? I think that this is a time I want to live the rest of my life from this moment. I don't just want to get through it. Because one thing the people of Boyle Heights and Dolores Mission have taught me, as soon as we say that's a God-forsaken place, that's a God-forsaken person, or that's a God-forsaken moment, then we've given up. And God never gives up on us. And so I think that's the thing that I respond to. All the concerns, they're not new, but it's a new invitation to say, how can we see God at work in this moment, and how can we get on that bus? You know, how can we participate in that movement? Because I think that's just really important. We don't give up on people. God doesn't give up on us. And so this is a system, and this is a moment where we need to work it, and we need to get out and vote, and we need to do the things that we can do in order to live from this place, not just to get through it.
Thank you so much, Father. Those are some really wise words that you have mentioned there. We will now hear from Joyce. If you can share where you are from and your faith tradition.
Sure. Thank you. My name is Joyce Miller, and I'm a Midwesterner from the beginning. I grew up in Indiana, and I've been in California for a lot longer than I was in Indiana. I came out here as an adult. I have had many church affiliations in my lifetime, which I won't bore you with all of them, but I've ended up at First Unitarian Church in San Jose, which is on 3rd Street right across from St. James Park, if you don't know. And I don't know how much you know about Unitarians, but we are a very liberal church, and I'll just tell you a little bit about what it says on our website, and I'll just read this to you. We believe in the enduring value of love, service, and spiritual growth within a warm community. As we pledge every Sunday in both Spanish and English, this is our pledge to each other. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek truth in freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls may grow into harmony with the divine. This do we covenant with one another. And we believe that we're stronger together, and we try to support each other in our faith growth and in what we do as we try to make love visible in all that we see and do. I don't know how much more, I don't think you want to go into the weeds with Unitarianism, but we're a non-creedal church, if that means anything to you. And so we operate from principles, and we have 7 principles that guide our faith and our lives. And the principles that have been very much brought up lately because of what's going on in our political scene is our second principle, our first principle, which is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And the second one is justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. And more lately, the one that we're working on right now because of the voting is our fifth principle, which is the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in our society at large. And emanating from that is our feeling that voting is a spiritual practice. And we are making it very, very clear that we are going to be focusing on what we can do to make sure that everyone votes. And in our own congregation, I mean, we're Unitarians have DNA. They're very much interested in social justice. Over its many years, we're very much keyed into social justice, and I would say most of our people are active voters and take part in that. But we also know that we come from some privilege for sure, and that we want to be sure that we are helping anyone out there who is not a voter or is not registered, and we want to be sure that we're doing what we can do to get the word out to people to vote. So we're very involved in that. And I don't know whether this is the appropriate time to tell you what we're doing, but we have every Friday, we have 15 or 20 people meeting, writing letters to get people to vote all over the country. And we'll have 3,000 letters to mail on the 17th of October that have gone to 5 or 6 different states. And I think during this period of, while we're in the pandemic, the emphasis from our minister, who has been wonderful, is to, we're looking at resilience. Our whole year is focused on how do you build resilience in people and in groups. And then this month is on deep listening. And that's what we're trying to do, is how deep listening should bring us to action in voting. So is that good enough?
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for being with us
I'll tell you
today.
more about a worship service we're planning, but I think that's later.
Sounds great. The same question goes for you as I did for Father Brendan. When you hear the cries or concerns of your congregants, what are you telling yourself and them about how to process this period of time?
Well, I think we've been focusing a lot on resilience and how much and gratitude for what we have, and looking at how we can really reach out to others. And because we're worshiping by Zoom, we're constantly aware of the fact that we need each other. We're stronger together. We reach out to each other. We have small group ministry, and we have more than half of our church is in a small group, and they meet by Zoom every week to support each other and to support whatever we're doing in the community. I think our minister has been quite wonderful about making sure that our worship services acknowledge how much we all need each other, and how much support we need in our society to get through what we're getting through. And I really agree with Father Brendan about it's not just getting through it, it's really using this time to plan what is coming next, because we all know that we don't want to go back where we came from. We need to go forward and change the things that were not working, and make sure that we are looking forward about how things can be better in our society.
Thank you so much for sharing. Those were some really great words as well. As we stated before, this is a really critical election year. Along with the presidential campaign, we have critical propositions on the ballot that was mentioned before, and these could have grave effects on our families and our communities. California has the 5th largest economy in the world, yet it falls short in providing adequate funding to services that support the state's children, ranking 41st in the nation on education spending, according to the Governor Gavin Newsom's office. The Schools and Communities First initiative, which would bring over $1 billion into the Santa Clara County every year into our children's schools, community colleges, and cities for things our families need, like healthcare services, affordable housing, clean water, and alternatives for incarceration. It would provide tax breaks for small businesses and close tax loopholes so that large corporations start paying for their share. So I wanted to ask Patty, if you had $1 billion to invest in this county, how would you use it and why?
Well, I'd begin by investing in our children and their families. I was privileged to grow up in a home that really valued education and service to others, and that made us close as a family and as a community. I was in a real tight community. I think our country would be very successful if every child felt that way growing up. Mm-hmm. And to make them feel a part of something and that's bigger than themselves, but they're an incredible part of that something. And it begins with our smallest and our youngest, and bringing their parents in. And, you know, when you get a new appliance or drive a new car, you get a handbook, but when children are born, parents aren't handed a handbook. So parent education is critical, and early education is critical. Providing support for families for social emotional growth and well-being is critical. Having alternatives to traditional education, because that doesn't always work for every child. Having other alternatives that you can provide for children as they need, so that they're not turned off to learning. I was fortunate to be have learning at the center of my career, and because I love learning so much, and I would like every child to feel that way, that no matter what, that they're tuned into learning. So, providing for schools to really develop those relationships with children and their families, I think is critical. And that's, I think, $1 billion well spent.
Thank you so much. I believe we would all agree to that. I would now like to ask Aida the same question. If you had $1 billion to invest in this county, how would you use it and why?
Ooh. Actually, the first thing would be kind of an auditing the allocations. Una auditoría en la alocación de los gastos del condado. Because I've seen that during training, we were trained to have about 30 codes of immigration codes. So the allocations were going to go based on that, right? And then once I went to work, it was down to, from 60, it was down to 2. So either you were a citizen or you were undocumented. So that means that the money didn't really go exactly how it was supposed to go. It was not accounted for that way. So first, I want to spend that money, a lot of that money, to go and clear that up. So then, una vez que está limpio y estamos en el mismo plano, then education, early childhood education, se necesitan nidos para los niños, education in the formal way, and after school education. Porque no solamente el niño tiene que estar educado, pero se le tiene que ayudar, suplementar luego de las clases. A lot of them are latchkey children, and they need to have some kind of protection and also some kind of tutoring. So that would help a lot. Now, after that would be health, because if we're not healthy, guess what? Si no estamos saludables, no pasa nada. Y luego vivienda. We need to have a roof over our heads. We need to know that we'll have a roof over our heads or feel safe for the next couple of years and stuff like that. We cannot just think, well, we have it today and spend it or not know, because a lot of people don't do it by choice. I mean, people don't do it by choice. It just happens. So yeah, that's it. Audit, and then school, health, and roof. So auditoría, escuelas, salud y vivienda.
Thank you so much, Aida. I think those are crucial points that you just made. I would like to move on to Father Brendan. How do you talk to congregants about these initiatives such as Schools and Communities First?
I think I appreciate what Patty and Aida just said, because I think the first thing I would say is they talk to me about it, whether they know it or not. They'll teach me what it means to invest in our community, because my congregation figured this out years ago.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody's struggling, for a large period of our history, we just wanted to get rid of those people. If you're not doing well, then get out of this neighborhood, go to jail, go somewhere else, stay in your country, There was a narrative that anybody who was suffering needed to be avoided. But then the women in our community started reading the gospel, and you say, no, Jesus gets closer to the people who are the suffering ones. Jesus gets closest to the one who's the sickest and invests in them and touches them, lifts them up and puts them in the center. Jesus puts the child in the middle of the room and says, what we do to this child, we're doing to God, basically. And so the folks come to me with that wisdom, and they talk to me about that, like the kind of answers that Patty and Aida just gave, right? What would you do in Los Angeles? The number that we would receive from this proposition is something like $4 billion. And I always joke, I say, that's a lot of tacos. And they always laugh, that's a lot of tacos, Padre, sí. But they know what that difference would make, because they've seen what's happened when we've poured billions of dollars every year into the jails and not into the schools. And so for us, I let the people talk. Let the people tell you what they want in their community. And then this proposition, Proposition 15 specifically, is just a very clear turning the boat back around, back to where it should have been. A lot of our folks come from campesino backgrounds, right? A lot of our folks worked in their pueblos in the land. And they know that when you live on the land, if you don't give it back what you've been taking out, you won't live for very long. And what's happened in California is people, large property owners, not homeowners, not small businesses, but big corporations for the last 40 years have been making profits after profits after profits, and they're not putting back into the land, into the people, into the schools that are training their future workers. They're not putting that investment back. And so it's just not a sustainable model. It's just not a sustainable model. And the people who put food on our tables, they know that. They've known it for a long time. So all I have to do is to say to them, well, this is a proposition that invests in those communities and those schools. And sí, padre, eso es lo que queremos nosotros, sí.
Thank you so much, Father. And I want to say the same question goes to you, Joyce. How do you engage your fellow congregants or family members about this initiative? And what are some of the responses that you have been hearing?
Okay, our PACT LOC brought this up a month or so ago about what are we going to do about educating our congregation about the propositions. And we had all sorts of ideas about how to do that. And then Reverend Nancy, who is our pastor, is very active in PACT, as you all know. And she said that, why don't we just do a worship service and educate, just take that time and do it. So that's coming up this Sunday. And the whole worship service is on voting and the proposition, not all, but the ones that PACT, and Christopher Logan is going to be speaking to the congregation. And then several of our congregants are going to be covering other of the propositions. And then it's going to be a wonderful service. We're starting out reading John Lewis's final letter. And then the song is going to be the one that was played at his funeral on Good Trouble. It's going to be a wonderful service, just focused exactly on what we can do as allies to make sure that we see some of the changes that we all want. And so I think that's going to be, and then we're doing actually the last Sunday of the month, we're also doing voting as a spiritual practice. And we're going to be talking more and more about voting. So our people are pretty, I should say they're energetic about this. They're pretty heated up, frankly, about this election, and we're doing all that we can to get people to vote.
Thank you so much, Joyce. Now we're hearing from our leaders, and now we want to hear from some of our community members, which Aida happens to be. Now I want to ask, how does it make you feel, Aida, hearing the clergy talk about this proposition? Do you think this is important for our families to hear about?
It's extremely important. And whenever you go to church and whenever you have a family that is involved in a religious community, there is a lot of respect, and there is a lot of respect to the pastor, to the rabbi, to the mullah. They would respect that, and they respect your opinion. So it is very important. Pienso que es muy importante para las personas escuchar la guía del sacerdote, del rabino o del mulá. Y pienso que siempre se debe escuchar. Si no quieren respetar o hacer las mismas cosas, por lo menos escuchar. Y esto siempre es una experiencia positiva, no solamente para ellos y para sus hijos. Besides, whenever a minister speaks, it's not just based on the community or the geographical area. Nowadays, because of media, we can actually afford to listen to certain priests And I've heard, you know, wonderful things from priests in many countries and in many areas. And I think we're taking advantage of that, and that's very good. Anyway, you know, thank you so much for this. And I've never heard much about Unitarianism, and I've been to your church to a couple of symphony concerts. You have them off and on, and I haven't been to yours, Father Brendan, but I imagine you get a lot of people around, especially with those tacos.
Thank you so much, Aida. Muchas gracias por sus palabras. I want to ask Patty, what would it mean to your family to learn more about schools and community first? And how would you feel when clergy speaks of the importance of voting?
I think it's a moral obligation to vote. And I haven't heard this year, of course, I'm not around as many people because of COVID, but usually in the time of election, you hear some discussion about why should I vote? My vote doesn't count. And I think last election really drove home how important it is to vote and what the consequences of our votes can be. I'm very hopeful, and I think especially the proposition that we were discussing will bring funds into much needed areas in the community that are in danger of losing funds because of the drop in people's employment. But everybody, I think, has an obligation, even if they don't have young children.
Right.
We are growing tomorrow. Bringing up the children, having them learn, we're growing tomorrow right there. And the child that we are helping or hurting could be the one making decisions for us in the future. So it's our moral obligation for everybody to participate and to support areas that support our community.
Thank you so much, Patty. Now I want to ask Father Brendan, are there any tools that you are using that you have found helpful to share with your faith community?
Yeah, you know, it's a fascinating, one of the things we're learning is all the tools that we had that we didn't use so much, you know, like Zoom meetings are very convenient. If we're trying to network here in Los Angeles or there in Santa Clara County, it takes a long time to get across from one side to the other, but we can have beautiful meetings like this and get together. So I think just the basic gathering places that we can still be together are really important. We're using Zoom really creatively. We're doing Friday night phone banks. So we're using the PDI app, which allows you to match the list from your congregation to the voting registration list. So Friday nights, we're calling each other. We're calling other folks from Dolores Mission, and we get the volunteers into a Zoom room together, and then we all put ourselves on mute, and it's funny because you can watch everybody laughing and talking to everybody else. And then we're together so that if I have a question, I can unmute myself and ask the people in the room, the other volunteers, hey, could you help me answer this question for this person? And it creates a sense of community. So we've been really creative with the technology. But then there's a big gap sometimes in our community. A lot of folks in our community don't have access to a phone and a tablet or a computer to do all of that at one time. So what we figured, we asked the community, they said, you know, I have a list in my own phone of people that I know I can call. And so we made a compromise. We said, okay, we'll give you a list that has the questions we would have asked about the propositions we're interested in. Call your own friends and family, write down their name and their address as they're registered, and then give us those answers. And then we can go find them in the database later and get the data up to speed. But it was a way, it was really moving to me because it's a way for the folks who sometimes don't have access to really participate. And for us at Dolores Mission, and I think this is true in a lot of the other places that we work, a successful campaign is not always the one we win, it's the one where everyone participates. For us, the most successful campaign is the one where the woman who's selling gum in front of our church, who that's her only income, that she can participate. That's a successful project for us. And I trust, and I think that with God with us, when we participate, we do win. I think that's what we see. When we get everybody, the moral obligation to vote is for that reason, right? That when we get people out there to vote, the community actually says what it wants, what it needs, and the system, I think, can turn towards the direction of justice. But for us, any tools, even as humble as they are, just a simple list that people say, hey, Father, I called these 10 people and this is what they told me, that's participation. And at this point, the 100% participation is our goal. We set other goals, we want 1,000 conversations, we want to do this, we're using all this technology. But I think God looks down at us and is very happy when she sees everybody everybody counted, everybody involved, everybody taking their own leadership seriously. So yeah, I think there's a lot of other things we're doing, text-based campaigns and stuff like that. But I like to always raise up the simplest version sometimes is the one that lets somebody who wants to make a difference get in the door. And that's the most powerful thing we can do.
Definitely agree. Now I want to ask Joyce the same question. Are there any tools or events that you are using or have found helpful to motivate your faith community?
Well, I think probably this worship service that I just mentioned is the biggest tool that we have. And I think Christopher, when he speaks on Sunday, is going to be inviting our congregation to participate in the phone bank. That'll be a pitch that he makes, and people will have an opportunity to accept that offer and sign up for one of the events that PACT is doing. So other than that, I can't. Well, and of course, I told you we're writing lots of letters. We're going to have 3,000 letters out by October 17th is the big send that we're participating in this nationwide the vote. It's something our denomination is doing. It's nationwide. I think that's it.
Thank you so much for all of your responses. Now we want to continue, and I want to just say at PACT, we have launched our Familias y Compadres initiative. We have phone banking every Wednesday, and we invite everyone to text 10 family members and have those 10 family members text another 10 family members. And if you want to learn more about this or get in touch with us, you will find more information below in the comments section or in the chat box. Also, let's all take a moment to fill out the public pledge and vote with our values by texting SCF at PACT to 40649. And I believe it should also be in the chat box as well. Okay. Fill out the pledge card and share it with 10 of your friends, as well as those 10 to have other 10 people to be shared with. Information will also be below. Now, before we close, I want to give you the opportunity to share any last thoughts as we are in the final weeks before November 3rd, before the big election. We can go ahead and start with Father Brandon.
The first shall be last, they say. I'm just full, my last thought is just a heart full of gratitude. Way down here in the southern part of the kingdom, to hear the good work you all are doing up there and to share some of the stuff we're doing. Just feel so grateful that we're not alone in this. Sometimes it can feel like we're just struggling here on our own in this little corner of the neighborhood. But to hear the stories and the motivations and the faith that drives you up in the north is also big help for us. So just a big heart of gratitude for everything y'all are doing.
Thank you so much. Patty, is there anything you would like to say? Any last words?
So somebody that I used to work for said one of the most important things about when I was a mentor to be a mentor was relationships, 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 and building positive relationships. So we all have people that have touched our lives and that continue to touch our lives that we can reach out to. I haven't seen many of you ever before, and I feel close to you in this endeavor. And it's always wonderful to work with people who are like-minded and like-hearted. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And you can go ahead, Joyce.
Well, I'm feeling a great deal of gratitude also for hearing other people's stories and giving me even more motivation than I came in with to work on this proposition, especially Patty and Aida telling us about how it's going to make a difference. In real time, I read about it, but to hear it from your mouths is really important, and I appreciate that, and I thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Aida, anything you would like to say?
Oh, actually, I'm at loss for words. Actually, I just think the communication is the most important goal that we can have. We cannot expect our friends, our family, our neighbors to know what we're thinking if we don't go and speak to them and tell them and ask them. And, you know, the vote, like I said, is so important. And yet I see that most people don't vote here. I come from a country where we had to vote. They would actually put your, you know, ink in your finger, and that meant that you voted, or otherwise you would get a fine. But anyway, and so people would go and just vote blank, you know. But here, you do have the chance. You have an option over here. And like I said, to all of those people that became citizens, please, please use that privilege. That's the biggest privilege you got the day that you chose to be an American. And then the last thing is keep on improving yourselves. God doesn't want you to die of boredom.
I'd like to say one last thing. It's our voice. Our
Yeah,
vote
of
is our
course.
voice.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Thank you all so much for joining the Justice Project today. Our moral response to COVID-19 statement is available at pactsj.org. You can also go to our Facebook page to sign in to our moral statement for other ways to get involved. Again, we appreciate you and your time for being with us today. Don't forget to text SCF PACT to 40649
Got it.
and fill out your pledge card today. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you at the same time next week on the next episode for our Justice Project.
Thank you.